Data residency and data sovereignty shape how you design, describe, and defend a SOC 2 environment. Residency answers the question, where is the data stored? While sovereignty asks whose laws apply to that data wherever it sits. In a SOC 2 context, these twin concepts influence scope boundaries, control choices, and the specific evidence you must present to demonstrate effective operation. They also intersect directly with the trust services categories. Availability? Can your multi-region design honor legal limits and still meet RTO/RPO? Confidentiality? Are storage and transfers region-constrained and encrypted? And privacy? Do notices and processing records match reality? Treat this topic as a lens. When you look through it, standard controls like logging, backups, and disaster recovery take on new dimensions because location and jurisdiction are now part of their definition of effective. Regulatory drivers create the practical constraints you must engineer around. In the EU, GDPR restricts transfers of personal data to countries lacking adequate protections unless safeguards, such as standard contractual clauses, are in place and actually followed. In the United States, state laws like CCPA/CPRA introduce obligations about consumer rights that can extend to where data is processed and how it's shared, while certain states and public contracts dictate in-state storage for sensitive categories. Sector rules add another layer. Health, finance, public sector, and education regimes may specify storage locations, access pathways, or attestation requirements for subprocessors. Most importantly, customer contracts often go further than statutes, naming permitted regions, defining notice obligations for any changes, and tying breach notification timelines to cross-border handling risks. Your SOC 2 program must absorb all of these inputs and express them as clear, testable controls. To work effectively, everyone must grasp the difference between residency and sovereignty. Residency refers to the physical or logical region in which primary copies, replicas, and backups are stored. Think U.S. 1 or U.S. Central 1 and the facilities behind those labels. Sovereignty refers to the legal jurisdiction claiming authority over the data. Courts, regulators, and law enforcement who may compel disclosure regardless of where a disk sits. Cloud providers complicate the picture by offering multi-region services, cross-region analytics, and global control planes that may generate metadata beyond your chosen region. Legal ownership and access rights may cross borders as soon as a support ticket is opened or a global operations team investigates an incident. A sound SOC 2 approach names both dimensions explicitly, then binds them together with controls that prevent silent drift from either promise. These location realities must be captured in the system description because that document is the auditor's map of your world. Describe primary and replica regions for each in-scope data store, including databases, object storage, search indices, analytics buckets, logs, and backups. Draw the data flows that connect applications to these stores, call out managed services with their own replication patterns, and note any cross-border transfers for processing, caching, or content delivery. If you use region-adjacent services, e.g. managed logging that aggregates globally, disclose this and the controls that minimize exposure. Tie those design facts back to privacy commitments and customer contracts. The goal is traceability. A reader should be able to pick any dataset and follow its journey while seeing the controls that keep it compliant and available. Data classification is your lever for precision. Not all data needs the same residency treatment, so define classes: public, internal, confidential, regulated, and bind them to regional policies. For regulated or customer-restricted classes, enforce geographic tags and storage metadata, and apply policy as code that blocks deployments to disallowed regions. Build inventory views that show which datasets carry residency requirements and where they actually live, including lineage for derived artifacts, analytics tables, cached objects, logs. Classification should propagate automatically. When a column in a table is tagged as personal data, that tag should flow to replicas, extracts, and backups. SOC 2 evidence then becomes straightforward: an export proving the tag, a control proving enforcement, and a report proving nothing slipped through. Your residency posture is only as strong as your sub-service chain. Catalog each provider's data center regions used for primary storage, replication, backups, logging, support tooling, and analytics. Obtain their SOC 2 or ISO 27001/2708 reports and confirm which regions and services are covered, noting carve-outs and shared responsibility boundaries. Capture these facts in the vendor register, and for critical services, reflect them in contracts or DPAs specifying authorized regions and notification duties for changes. For dynamic cloud platforms, track bridge letters and service-level change logs so you can prove continuity between audit periods. The objective is confidence that vendor behaviors won't undermine your own residency and sovereignty commitments. Encryption is the control that travels with the data when geography becomes complex. Encrypt before cross-border transfer, ideally at the application layer. Use transport encryption for all inter-region links, and manage keys in jurisdictions that match your sovereignty strategy. Customer-managed keys, CMEK, or HSM-backed keys, anchored in the approved region, can reduce exposure to foreign legal process by ensuring access requires your involvement. Conduct explicit assessments of jurisdictional risk, such as exposure under the U.S. Cloud Act or similar laws, and record compensating controls and customer communications. Encryption does not erase sovereignty risk, but it raises the bar and provides concrete, testable controls auditors can evaluate against confidentiality and privacy criteria. Residency controls must be provable. Export configuration states that show region settings for databases, object stores, queues, data warehouses, and logging syncs. Capture API outputs that list replica and backup destinations. Produce network policies, routes, endpoints, peerings, demonstrating that traffic stays within allowed geography when possible. For managed services, include screenshots or signed exports of region constraints, storage class policies, and replication rules. Bind each artifact to a control ID in your evidence index so auditors can sample by control, by system, or by dataset and still land on the same proof. The more machine-generated and time-stamped your evidence, the more persuasive it becomes. Designs that never fail are fantasies. Residency compliance must survive failure. Simulate cross-region failover for your critical services and prove that encryption, access controls, logging, and privacy protections remain intact during the switch. Validate that automated runbooks don't point to disallowed regions and that your DR tooling respects location policies for snapshots and restores. If customer contracts require notice of region changes, show the notification artifacts and timestamps as part of the test. Retain the playbooks, console outputs, and validation checklists as auditable artifacts. This turns DR from a technical exercise into a compliance continuity demonstration aligned with availability and privacy expectations. Contracts are where legal promises become technical requirements. Ensure agreements specify authorized regions for storage, processing, and backups, and align service-level objectives to any jurisdictional obligations. If cross-region moves could occur for capacity rebalancing, DR, or provider changes, define consent and notice mechanisms in advance, including timelines and channels. Store executed consents and renewals in your evidence repository, linked to customer records and the specific services affected. Standardize language so sales, legal, and engineering do not create conflicting commitments across different customers, and build contract-driven controls into your deployment pipelines. Monitoring closes the loop between intent and reality. Deploy real-time alerts for data movement outside approved boundaries using CSPM tools, cloud provider policies, and custom detectors that watch for region attributes on storage, backups, logs, and analytics jobs. Build dashboards that visualize regional distribution by dataset class and environment, with drill downs to resource IDs and owning teams. Send automated notifications to compliance and data protection officers when geotags change or when services are provisioned in non-approved regions. Schedule periodic validations that reconcile asset inventories, geotags, and flow logs, producing monthly exports that feed your SOC 2 evidence set. To make these controls tangible, embed region rules in your pipelines and templates. IAC modules should require an approved region list for each data class, emit failures if a resource targets a disallowed location, and auto-tag assets with jurisdiction metadata. CI/CD checks should verify that analytics jobs, streaming syncs, and log exports resolve to permitted regions. Tickets generated by policy failures should include links to the violated rule, the resource, and the controlling contract clause or policy, which accelerates both remediation and auditor walkthroughs. This is how you convert policy intent into executable, repeatable enforcement. Deep technical examples help teams internalize the concepts. Consider an analytics platform built on cloud object storage plus warehouse tables. The raw data bucket is tagged EU Personal, with a policy that prevents creation in non-EU regions and blocks cross-region replication. The warehouse is configured to a single EU region with CMAC keys stored in the same jurisdiction. Materialized views inherit data class tags and trigger build time checks if a developer attempts to place them in a multi-region dataset. Scheduled exports into a machine learning workspace are routed through a VPC endpoint with egress policies, and any attempt to write to US Central raises a pipeline failure. Evidence comes from policy evaluation logs, resource inventories, and successful job history matching the allowed region list. Edge cases will test your design discipline. Global content delivery, anti-abuse services, DDoS scrubbing, and fraud detection often rely on worldwide infrastructure. If these services touch regulated data, you'll need patterns like tokenization at the edge, split key encryption, or hashing that ensures only non-sensitive tokens traverse global paths. Similarly, centralized observability tools may default to global storage for metrics and traces. Restrict high-sensitivity logs to regional stores or anonymize fields before export. Each exception must be documented with a clear rationale, a compensating control, and a plan for future alignment as providers release regionalized features. Finally, remember that residency and sovereignty design is a product decision as much as a compliance one. Product managers should know which customer segments demand single-region guarantees and which accept multi-region redundancy. Support leaders should be trained to route sensitive cases to region-qualified staff and tooling. Engineering leads should own policy as code libraries that make the right thing the default. Your SOC 2 program succeeds when these roles collaborate to produce consistent design choices, consistent documentation, and consistent evidence. So when auditors sample any control, the answer is predictable, repeatable, and convincingly tied to both law and reliability. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Balancing disaster recovery with residency obligations is a common architectural challenge. High availability often requires geographic redundancy, yet certain regulations prohibit replication outside designated regions. The solution lies in designing multi-region redundancy within legally permissible zones or sovereign clouds. For example, data subject to EU protection may use dual regions within the European Economic Area to satisfy both resilience and residency needs. RTO and RPO targets must reflect these boundaries, as global replication might breach legal constraints. Document every DR design decision and test failovers to demonstrate compliance continuity. When auditors review these results, they'll see that availability and legality coexist, not compete, in your resilience strategy. Third-party attestations strengthen confidence in your residency and sovereignty posture. Cloud providers, data center operators, and major SaaS partners should furnish independent SOC 2 or ISO 27001/27018 reports confirming regional controls, encryption safeguards, and physical security measures. Certificates and auditor opinions that explicitly reference regional boundaries provide authoritative evidence for your customers and auditors alike. Track the expiration and renewal of these reports, ensuring continuity between periods through bridge letters. All provider attestations should be cataloged in the vendor evidence package alongside your own controls, demonstrating that assurance extends through the entire supply chain. Integrating residency and sovereignty into the risk register turns regulatory complexity into manageable governance. Each jurisdictional exposure, such as data transfers to non-adequate countries, key escrow in foreign clouds, or third-party analytics services operating globally, should be logged as a distinct risk. Rate each for likelihood, impact, and mitigation strength, and assign clear ownership for review. Update these entries quarterly as laws evolve or infrastructure changes. By quantifying sovereignty risk in the same framework as operational or financial risk, you show leadership that compliance issues are neither abstract nor hidden. They are tracked, mitigated, and prioritized like any other enterprise exposure. Customer communication is where compliance maturity becomes tangible trust. Proactively notify customers about region changes or new data processing locations before they occur. Publish annual transparency reports that summarize data flow geography, major control tests, and privacy commitments. Contracts and service terms should clearly define the shared responsibility model, what your organization guarantees, and what customers can configure themselves. Supporting FAQs and help desk scripts should reflect the same consistent language, ensuring customers receive the same answer no matter who they ask. Transparency transforms residency compliance from a behind-the-scenes obligation into a customer-facing differentiator. Automation provides the most reliable enforcement for geographic controls. Cloud Security Posture Management (CSPM) tools and policy as code frameworks can continuously scan for misconfigured resources outside approved regions. Integrating region validation into infrastructure as code templates ensures that new deployments automatically include geotags and fail builds that violate residency policies. Automated tagging of assets by jurisdiction simplifies evidence creation and allows dashboards to show data distribution in real time. When drift occurs, such as an inadvertent replication to a disallowed region, alerts should trigger instantly, creating both remediation tickets and auditable logs. Automation turns compliance into continuous enforcement rather than periodic inspection. Evidence expectations for residency assurance follow the same rigor as other SOC 2 controls but add a geographic dimension. Auditors will request configuration exports showing region settings for storage, databases, and backups, DR test records confirming that failovers stayed within legal zones, vendor SOC reports demonstrating regional coverage, and consent logs verifying customer approvals for cross-region transfers. Each artifact should link to its control ID in the evidence index, demonstrating completeness and traceability. Combining these with automation outputs, like policy as code results or CSPM reports, creates a multi-layered defensible evidence package that proves ongoing adherence to data sovereignty obligations. Common pitfalls arise when organizations assume cloud region selection alone guarantees compliance. Undocumented replication across secondary or logging services often extends data beyond approved zones. Backup tools might default to global storage, leaving no evidence of alignment. Contracts may lack clarity on how region is defined, creating mismatched expectations between legal and technical teams. These issues are solved through automated validation, explicit documentation, and cross-functional quality assurance reviews. A mature program treats every replication path, backup, and monitoring feed as a data flow to be validated and logged, not as a technical detail to be ignored. Metrics and key risk indicators, KRIs, make residency performance measurable. Track the percentage of in-scope data verified within declared regions, and set thresholds for acceptable variance. Monitor the number of cross-border exceptions identified and average remediation time for each. Count how frequently regulatory updates are reviewed and incorporated into controls. Present these trend lines in compliance dashboards and executive reports to show progress and accountability. By quantifying location compliance, organizations transform geography from a static requirement into an actively managed control domain under SOC 2's continuous monitoring philosophy. Residency and sovereignty maturity progress through identifiable stages. Initially, organizations manually track region selections and rely on policy declarations. The next phase introduces CSPM scanning and automated validation scripts. Mature environments operate with real-time geo-validation, dashboards showing data distribution by jurisdiction, and alerts for deviations. The most advanced programs employ predictive analytics to anticipate residency conflicts before deployment, automatically adjusting configurations to maintain compliance. At that point, privacy, security, and availability monitoring merge into a single, integrated assurance ecosystem, an achievement that demonstrates both governance sophistication and technical excellence. Cross-framework alignment extends the value of these efforts far beyond SOC 2. Residency controls overlap directly with ISO 27018's cloud privacy principles, GDPR Articles 44 through 50 governing data transfers, and NIST Cybersecurity Framework Function PR.DS, Protect Data Security. Reusing evidence and aligning reports across frameworks eliminates redundancy while reinforcing consistency. Global organizations can harmonize reporting so each regional regulator or auditor sees a unified control story, one policy set, one monitoring framework, one global trust narrative. Harmonization turns compliance from fragmented regional tasks into an integrated, enterprise-wide demonstration of accountability. In summary, data residency and sovereignty are now inseparable from SOC 2 compliance. They define where your data lives, who governs it, and how confidently you can prove those facts. Effective programs combine clear documentation, automated validation, and proactive transparency to satisfy both legal requirements and customer expectations. Residency is about precision. Sovereignty is about accountability. Together, they reinforce availability, confidentiality, and privacy in the most global sense, showing that trust in your systems transcends borders while respecting every jurisdiction. The next chapter builds on this foundation, exploring key management and encryption rotation, the cryptographic backbone that upholds sovereignty and trust across every region in your control.